Thank you for joining us today on Connect and Collaborate. Today, we're bringing you a special installment, Finding Colorado's Next Governor. The Colorado Business Roundtable is proud to partner with the Denver Business Journal to bring you in-depth interviews with Colorado's gubernatorial candidates. I'm Tammy Schaefer, your on-air producer, along with Jeff Wasden, president of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Jeff?
Hi, Tammy.
And Ed Seelover of the Denver Business Journal. Ed, good to have you.
Great to be back.
Take it away, guys.
Well, it's a delight to see an old tennis buddy of mine here running for governor. We were chatting before we got started on air that we've known each other for close to 20 years, with our sons playing a lot of competitive tennis. But we'll have some time maybe in the last segment to talk a little bit more about tennis and some of your other fun legislative experiences and things at the Capitol. But I do want to jump right in, give you a chance, Vic, to really start to tell our listeners a little bit about you, your family, and most importantly, why the heck you decided to run for governor of the state of Colorado.
Well, it's great to see you again, Jeff, and Ed and Tammy. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for doing this and having us on. It's such an important election next year. And the real reason people ask me all the time, why are you running for governor, Vic? And the answer is pretty straightforward. You can whine and complain, you can be upset, you can be disappointed, feel disillusioned, or you can put yourself out there and be part of the solution. I choose to be part of the solution. I mean, there's been a tremendous erosion in trust and confidence in our elected officials and our institutions. And I think I'm an outsider. I'm a non-politician, but I'm a problem solver. And I think that we have to have people that have more of an entrepreneurial background step up and serve the public. After all, I mean, this is the next CEO of the state. This is a very, very critical election next year. And I have unique skills and talents, and hopefully I can bring some confidence and trust back to our institutions again.
Well, when you talk about that entrepreneurial background, share a little bit about your business experience and the companies you've been involved with and the success of those companies.
Well, I've got an interesting background. I was raised by a single mother who, at the age of 11, I went to take care of her, who's 90% blind and deaf. So my mother has a great amount of pride and a tad of stubbornness, and she didn't want to take much from anyone, so we struggled. We were almost homeless several times, moved more than a dozen times over my formative years. I started working at the age of 13. I'm a product of the public schools, a product of public university, and started my very first business when I was a junior in college and when I was 21 years old. I've never worked for anyone other than myself. I've built 6 successful companies, some of the largest private companies in the country, including a company called Advantage Wireless I started in the 1990s, which actually brought me here to Colorado in 1996. My current company is a disruptive lending company. We are an alternative to banks, and we lend money to small regional developers. We're the largest private financing company in the state of Colorado. We currently are operating in 6 states currently and positioned to make a public offering. But I think the essence of being an entrepreneur is somebody that's not afraid to take risks and has a different degree of imagination and creativity and looks at problems differently. I mean, we have to start solving problems. We're terribly polarized as a people. And we have to start dealing where people actually say, you know what, our schools are getting better, our roads are getting better. The government will leave us alone so we can actually make sense to start a business again.
So we see a lot of people in society who have that great entrepreneurial spirit that you have. Not a lot of them decide to get into politics, however. Talk to us a little bit about what made you decide to jump into the political scene. I mean, not just now, but 10 years ago when you served a term in the Colorado legislature, and how you take your business experience and relate it to the way that you want government to run.
Well, those are 2 different questions. I mean, I've been involved in public service my whole life. I've started charities. I started a company, charity years ago called Ready to Work Strive. I deliver Meals on Wheels every Friday. I've been a Rotarian for a long time. I've been involved in many different, numerous, and most things around healthcare. Very interested in healthcare reforms as well, clinic-based nonprofit healthcare clinics that don't require insurance and that can provide high-quality care. So my wife has actually been very involved as well in a number of public service as well, including issues around mental health. So I mean, I've been involved. I've always had a calling for public service, and I just think that right now, I mean, our state is really in a crossroads. We can't seem to get things done. The people are so bitter towards one another, most especially in Congress. And we have to start electing people that are more outsiders, that are not career politicians, that are not indebted to any special interest groups whatsoever. I don't think I answered the second part of your question, so maybe I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's fine. I threw two at you at once there, but we're going to talk about specific issues later in the show. But just in general, how do you take your entrepreneurial, your business background and apply it to your thoughts on policy, your thoughts on what you want government to be for the business leaders of the state?
Well, the biggest thing is, as an entrepreneur, I mean, I've learned when I was in the legislature, and I was very fortunate to represent Douglas and Teller counties a decade ago, that relationships really do matter. Understanding the legislative process really matters. That actually is very effective. So I have a unique set of both public and private sector experience. So how are we going to get things done? Well, let me tell you one thing specifically we're going to do. We're going to change this obscure committee. It's called the Legislative Audit Committee, and unless you work in politics or work at the General Assembly, most people have never heard of it. This tiny little committee does something called, does financial auditing of various different state bureaucracies, everything from the Colorado State Fair to Medicaid to state prisons. If we change that to performance auditing, meaning that when we hire a third-party auditor like KPMG or Ernst & Young or EKS&H, they're not only looking to make sure that all the monies are accounted for, but they're actually looking for efficiencies. They're looking for right sizing, and that takes all the politics out of it. So when these reports come back, the Democrats and the Republicans in the General Assembly can blame it on a third-party committee, and we can actually start doing more with less and actually start putting forward really meaningful reforms on a whole slew of issues.
Thanks
I
for
plan on
that.
using the legislative audit very effectively.
Okay. Thanks for that BRT commercial there, name dropping several of our great companies that are part of the Business Roundtable. I want to come back to your stint at the legislature. We'll do that after the break. We've got about a minute left. You're a very proud dad of a West Point grad and another kiddo. Talk a little bit about your family real quick as we leave segment one.
Oh, absolutely. I met my wife 30 years ago in college. So we got married. We'll be married 28 years next year. We have three amazing kids. Our daughter just graduated from CU last year. She's a software engineer. Our son is in his third year at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Plays tennis for West Point. He's studying military intelligence. And our youngest is 14, and she actually suffers from dyslexia. But she is she's a tremendous actor and singer. And so we're very, very proud of my family, a very tight-knit family.
I love that.
Great. We are going to come back talking more with Vic Mitchell, Republican candidate for governor, here on Connect and Collaborate in our Finding Colorado's Next Governor series. Stay with us and make a point to tune in to Connect and Collaborate on the last business day of each month to hear from all of the candidates. We will be back with more with Colorado's next Finding Colorado's Next Governor right after this break. We're so glad you're staying with us today for the Colorado Business Roundtable's special series of Finding Colorado's Next Governor. We're proud to partner with the Denver Business Journal. So I have Jeff Wasden, president of Colorado Business Roundtable here, and Ed Sealover of the Denver Business Journal. And we're talking with Vic Mitchell, one of the candidates for governor.
So Vic had mentioned in that first segment that you did serve a one-term stint at the state legislature about 10 years ago. Can you reference that time, why you decided not to rerun, and how you think that will help you as you look toward serving the state of Colorado potentially as this next governor?
Well, I loved it. I mean, actually, it reminds me, this race reminds me a lot of that 10 years ago, because when I ran, I had to go up against a Republican in the primary. And he was an incumbent, and people said he was unbeatable. He had never lost a race in 30 years in Douglas County, and I put him into retirement. And we're going to do the same thing here again next year, because I've got some very tough competitors. I got to beat, George Bush's cousin, Mitt Romney's nephew. I've got some very tough, formidable competitors. Why I left the legislature is an important question. I mean, when I was there, I actually was able to pass very substantive legislation on a host of issues. Probably my most significant legislative accomplishment was I passed an Alzheimer's bill that not only saved the state of Colorado money in search and rescue, but actually saved lives who had a propensity to wander. I also worked on a tuition assistance bill that was passed. I broke with my party and moved to regulate payday lenders, which I thought were predatory and engaging in practices to hurt poor people. So I'm not afraid to be independent-minded as well. I like to classify myself as an independent-minded conservative. But the reason I left was I just asked the question, am I doing enough in the legislature, or can I do more in the public domain outside of the legislature? And I guess it's not very fun being in the minority. We were in the minority 10 years ago, to say the least. We only had 25 Republicans or 40 Democrats. So we weren't a minority. We were a super minority. But I did leave after 2 years. I gave somebody else another chance, but I've been extremely active. I've ran a statewide campaign in 2011, which defeated would have been the largest tax increase in Colorado history, Proposition 103. I debated a very liberal state senator from Boulder. We went around the state. We were way outspent, and we defeated them 2-1. I've taught at 2 major state universities. I founded another company, which now today is one of the most successful private companies in Colorado today. So I've been an employer for 30 years, and most especially I helped my wife raise three terrific kids. So I've been busy since I left the legislature, and hopefully I've been involved in a number of different public service as well. But you know, you can serve your community one of 2 ways. You can serve it in the legislature, or you can serve it out. We just have too many career politicians. It was never, I don't think you should, our founding fathers never intended to have people that run from one office to another and stay there indefinitely. So that's generally why I left the legislature.
And I want to pick up on that a little bit, saying it's not fun being in the minority.
No, it's
if
not.
you are elected next governor, you're likely to at least be dealing with a Democratic-run House, which is unlikely to flip in the 2018 election. Talk a little bit about how you think you can cross the aisle. What is it? I mean, you complain about the state of politics, the gridlock right now. So what do you bring that's actually going to change that?
You're such an important question, Ed. I mean, you have to look at somebody. We base so much emphasis on who we support in politics based on their 3-minute stump speech. You have to look at somebody's track record. For 30 years, I've built extraordinary teams together, and people that don't look and think like me. I mean, people that come from different persuasions and a whole different series of facets of life. And yet I've been able to do extraordinary things each and every time. So that's the type of thinking. I mean, I believe that most public servants are really good-minded. They want to do the right thing. And there is areas that compromise can be reached without sacrificing your principles. Make no mistake about it. I mean, when I talk about getting us out of the Medicaid expansion, which right now we have 1 in 4 Coloradans are on Medicaid. We've had a $640 million increase in Medicaid just since 2010 under the Unaffordable Care Act. And most Coloradans today, 40% of Coloradans either don't have any insurance or have insurance, can't meet their deductibles and co-payments. My model is to basically get us out entirely of the Unaffordable Care Act, get us out of the exchange, and provide block grants to nurse practitioner clinics, to physician assistant clinics, where any Coloradan can access high quality primary care without the need for insurance, and get back to insurance for really what it's intended for chronic illness or specialty care, emergency. That's very interesting to a lot of Democrats. That should be interesting to most Republicans. So, I mean, we've never had an alternative to Medicaid. Medicaid is rationed, low-quality care. It's not working. Yet there's never been any imagination, any creativity, any true problem solving on how to get it done differently. So those types of things where I think shouldn't be overly partisan. Is that going to mean we're going to win? We only need to win over a few of them. And I think we can do it. I did it before when I was in the legislature. I passed substantive legislation. My Alzheimer's bill was the only bill, Republican bill in the Senate or in the House that was passed that required new funding. Not one single other Republican was able to do it. I was able to get that done when I was there previously. So I think that I've got a long history of working across the aisle and getting things done.
Well, Vicki led us right into our first topic, which is about health care, and certainly there's been a debacle back in D.C. dealing with the health care issue. You touched base on the Medicaid expansion, which is great, but I also want to get your view on the Senate tax plan with the potential of eliminating the individual mandate as part of that. Your thoughts on that and anything else on health care that you want to address before we shift on to energy and education?
You know, I think that would be terrific if they can get the version that's being floated around, getting rid of the individual mandate, which is very punitive and doesn't increase insurance, because what you're having is just young kids, mostly young, healthy kids, opting just to pay the penalty. I completely support the president and his endeavor in the current form for tax relief. I mean, what's not talked about in the tax relief is small business relief. I mean, we have to fix small business. Right now, our marginal tax rates are over 50%. Include the unaffordable care tax, our state tax, and our federal income tax. If you have a successful small business, you're paying 50% of every dollar of income directly to the government. I mean, you're taking away people's incentive to take risks and to innovate and to invest. because frankly, it's not worth it to many people to give up half of their income directly back to the government. So I commend the president for what he's doing on this effort. I truly hope it will get done.
And obviously that's an issue that you can weigh in on with the bully pulpit, whether you're elected or not, quite frankly, but not have any say on the voting. What about on a state level basis? How are state taxes for businesses? Do we need to adjust them in any form here?
Absolutely. I mean, but under the Gallagher Amendment, you know, it's we have some of the highest business taxes in the country. And what does that mean? How does that translate? Well, I've been around the state. I've been running I'm spending almost half my time in rural Colorado. And let me tell you, rural Colorado is not doing well. There's very few private businesses that are opening up. There's never been a central focus. I've put forward a 64 county economic development plan where we're really focused on rural Colorado, bring small to medium-sized employers to relocate to places like Craig, Colorado, or Huerfano County, which is really hurting, struggling. There's never been a government that's done that. We have to deal with the business tax penalties and costs. Some of our business taxes are as high as 30%. And it's just too high for if you want to attract a high-tech manufacturer or an agribusiness or a distribution company that requires them to buy land assets and other types of building assets. So we have to look at that entirely. I mean, I think it's a problem. We're simply just overtaxed and overregulated as a state right now.
Now, it sounds to me like you're singing the song I've heard a lot of business groups talk about before, and that is cutting into the business personal property tax. Am I right in that? So how do you do that without upending the budgets, especially of local governments who, in some cases, rely for the business personal property tax for more than 50% of their annual revenues?
Well, of course, any local governments can pass a mill levy if there's a significant cut in one area. I mean, we have to. The issue is not small rural counties being hurt with that. What the real issue is, we have had a state budget that's exploded in the last 10 years. I mean, we have a $29 billion state budget. When I was in the legislature a decade ago, it was about $18 billion. We've had a 40% increase in the size of our state government and a 22% increase in our population growth. We're growing government twice as fast as new people are coming to our state. So when they say, the Democrats are always very quick to tell you that there's no money, we've got all these massive shortages. The truth is there's a tremendous amount of waste and inefficiency. You see it at CDOT, you see it in you see it in Medicaid, you see it in a whole different areas of the way the state has been managed. And we have to get to zero cost budgeting. So there is money in the budget to deal with these types of things. We have to be much smarter, much more effective in the way we process and the way we go about solving problems in the real world. And we have to think about those terms as a business perspective in the way we're running our government.
And I want to move on to some of those in a second, but first tell me, what is your plan with business personal property tax? Are you talking about eliminating it, cutting it down gradually? What do you want to do?
Well, it would be too detrimental to eliminate it entirely, but sure, I would love to eliminate it entirely. I'd also love to get away with our state income tax entirely as well, which we're competing against states like Texas and Wyoming, which have zero state income tax. So we have to look at that. And I've worked with financial reporting for 30 years. I'm very familiar with what it takes to trim costs, and I plan on being very aggressive in that area. But yeah, absolutely, I would love to see a lot more money in business owners' pocketbooks, most especially manufacturers. Because manufacturing is really the future of our state. I mean, if we want to really grow the middle class and deal with some of the issues around income inequality, we have to have a strong, vibrant manufacturing sector.
I'm going to shift off of my education question. We'll come back to that after the break. You talked about the budget. We've got a minute left. What are the priorities under a Vic Mitchell governorship that you would look at to make sure that we fund appropriately areas where you'd cut?
Well, first and foremost, I want to roll back 100,000 pages of rules and regulations affecting small business. We've had 120,000 pages added under this administration, under this very liberal Hickenlooper administration. I want to roll back 100,000 pages. I want to bring in outsiders similar to myself that have a deep private sector background, maybe come from medicine, maybe come from nursing, maybe come from nonprofit fields, and really do a top-to-bottom review of our whole regulatory scheme and figure out which ones can be rolled back entirely or which ones need to be reformed. We just have so many regulations that are getting in the way of young people, especially pursuing their passions and eventually starting small businesses.
Good.
We will be back with more here on Connect and Collaborate as we focus on finding Colorado's next governor. We are here with Vic Mitchell, one of the candidates, and Jeff Wasden is helping us with the questions, along with Ed Seelever of the Denver Business Journal. Stick with us. We'll have more right after the break. We're glad you're staying with us today on Connect and Collaborate as we talk about finding Colorado's next governor. Today, our guest is Vic Mitchell, Republican candidate for governor.
Vic, I want to get into education right now. We can certainly talk about the Colorado paradox and graduation rates and changes that are needed in our education system. From a business guy talking with the Colorado Business Roundtable, I think it's really about preparing youth to enter the workforce with the right skills necessary to gain meaningful employment. What are your plans to ensure all students have access and opportunity to a bright future?
Well, education isn't the foundation of life. Education is life itself, and I've been part of the school choice and movement for a very long time. I actually taught recently last year at CSU. I served on the House Education Committee a decade ago. So what can be done? I mean, first and foremost, we need to reduce the power and influence of the teachers' unions. We have to allow unaccredited teachers to teach. What does that mean exactly? That means that if you're a retired scientist or retired engineer and you're living in a small town in Colorado, you should be able to go in and teach, maybe part-time without the traditional para benefits. The union has blocked all the meaningful reforms that need to happen. The good news is there's never been a better time to do education reform than today. I mean, we have extraordinary amount of exciting curriculum that's online, that's internet-based, everything from the Khan Academy right down the list that can be incorporated effectively into the classroom. But we have to start really focusing on really putting our kids and teachers first. I think the money should follow the kids and the parents as opposed to the union bureaucracy. I think we need to do a lot more on vocational trades in our rural communities especially. We should be teaching vocational trades directly in our Colorado public high schools. Most people don't understand in rural Colorado there's virtually no school choice. They're not teaching AP classes. They don't have charter schools. So the very least we should be investing in is more vocational trades. And I also think our teachers need to get paid more. I mean, some of our teachers are receiving atrociously low salaries. It's based entirely on tenure, not on performance, which it should be. So I think there's a great amount that can be done, that should be done, and I plan on doing just that, being very aggressive and taking on the teachers union and really moving the state forward in a series of different important reforms on school choice.
In recent years, the legislature has made some attempt to bridge the gap between business leaders and education leaders a little bit more, creating pathways to certain careers. What do you think of what's been done, and what is the state government's role in getting a pipeline between schools and companies, in your opinion?
I think they should be a very important facilitator. I mean, my plan for higher education, for example, is I want to triple the amount of STEM graduates, or STEAM is the latest acronym, science, technology, engineering, and math graduates. Basically, only about 1 in 4 Colorado kids who are going to a state university are graduating with a technical STEM degree. I want to make that 3 in 4. These are jobs that start at $80,000 a year and higher. These change somebody's life. But we're not, especially young girls, are not taking on these tougher disciplines. I also think we've got to really tackle the high cost of higher ed in Colorado. I mean, we're the 4th most expensive state in the country to send a kid to a state university. I mean, it's about $35,000 a year to send your kid to CU. A third of that is housing. They're not building any affordable student housing dorms. I think that could be done much more effectively. We're a real estate-centric economy. There's a great many alumni that work in real estate services that could be part of that solution. We're also not doing enough with getting rid of a great deal of the bureaucracy at our state universities. So I think I'd like to see our teachers teach more, our tenured professors teach more courses. Many of them are just doing research or teaching 1 class a year where the graduate students are teaching or the adjuncts are teaching. So we have to do a great deal more. My plan is to freeze college tuition the entire term of my administration, triple the amount of STEM graduates, and really focus on driving down the high cost of student housing.
There was a little bit of noise and discussion about Inc. Coffee this last weekend and gentrification. There's been a lot of discussion about Amazon. Talk a little bit about economic development and how you look at Colorado's overall competitiveness as a state in attracting and retaining businesses.
I think we're pretty competitive. I think our state tax rate is too high. I don't think 1 penny of state dollars should be going to Amazon. I mean, let's put this in some perspective here. Amazon has a market cap of over $500 billion. Their founder, Jeff Bezos, is worth over $100 billion. He's richer now than Bill Gates. Why would a Colorado taxpayer be giving this company money? This is the last company in the world that needs our money. We should be focusing all of our economic incentives on rural Colorado, on small, preferably Colorado-based companies that are looking to expand and go into some of our rural areas. That's why I've put a 64-county economic development plan that's very focused on rural Colorado. We're not going to focus on very large companies with tens of thousands of jobs. We're going to focus on jobs, high-quality employers that treat their employees well, that have a good balance sheet, that have maybe employed 20 to 100 employees, and they're looking to expand. That's where our economic incentives should be focused on.
Is that realistic, though? I mean, obviously, in an even world, we would be able to roll out our education, our business atmosphere, and say, come here. But when Texas or Utah or Arizona is opening up their pockets and throwing literally millions of dollars at companies to get them there, are we not at risk of losing our competitive edge?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, I've negotiated some of the most complicated commercial contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and with very large service providers when I was in the telecom industry. The economic development incentives are about the lowest thing on the totem pole. I mean, people, they want a highly educated workforce. They want a vibrant, people want to live in a very good community. They want to live in a state that's growing, that has great outdoor opportunities, great recreational opportunities. So they want something that they're not over-regulated, a state where they're not so regulated where their profits are going to be confiscated, and they're always thinking down the road for one more thing that could hurt their business. So these economic incentives, I think, are more PR than anything else. I think they're helpful for small companies that want to grow. Those that have a meaningful, but let's face it, you take the situation with Amazon. Do you think a few $1 million is going to make, I mean, it's not even a rounding error to that company. It has no impact long term to their business model. And if that's what they're basing it on, then, you know, then we should tell them, you know, that we're not the right fit for them. I mean, sometimes you got to tell people you're not the right fit. That's what leadership's about.
Let's talk a little bit about another economic development tool, one that Colorado has struggled to come up with an answer with, and that's our transportation system.
Yes.
Certainly, as you talk about safety and effectiveness, efficient movement of goods and services, also the quality of life. How do you solve this problem, Vic?
This has been just such a cluster for 22 years. We moved here in 1996 to start a company, a telecom company. It became one of the largest private telecom companies in the country. And I can tell you one thing consistently through both Republican and Democratic administrations, you know, we just keep getting more and more traffic and gridlock when there's no solutions. Here's my plan. First and foremost, we're going to change the Legislative Audit Committee. My plan is to move $2 billion directly into roads and infrastructure without increasing taxes or fees. So how are we going to do that? First and foremost, we're going to limit CDOT's bureaucracy to no more than 20% of their budget to overhead. Today it's roughly 70%. So we're going to bring in an outsider, somebody that has no ambition to run for office, somebody that understands development, reforming our budgeting, reforming our bidding process, and limit their whole department to no more than 20%. That would free up about $700 million. In addition, they have roughly $1 billion of cash and cash equivalents that's on their balance sheet today that can also be immediately deployed. And then if we can reform CDOT by saying, you know, through the Legislative Audit Committee and doing a performance review, they might come back and say, you know, CDOT, you don't need 3,300 employees. You really should be right-sized at 1,600 employees. If we save just 4% of our budget by changing to performance auditing, that's another $1 billion that could be saved, that could go into teacher pay and go into infrastructure. So my plan is we've got to fix the department first. It's got structural problems the way it's being operated today. And then first and foremost, then we can think about asking the taxpayer for more money. But right now, we're so overburdened right now with our taxes and fees. And my plan is to get $2 billion into roads and infrastructure without increasing taxes.
So let's say you do that. Where does the money go? What is the place of public transit in our funding going forward?
Well, public transit is basically done through RTD. It's not done through the CDOT's budget. So that also should be looked at. I mean, the people in Denver want more pathways, they want more biker lanes, but that's not reality for most of Colorado. We want our SUVs, we like our open roads in Colorado. But there's also a great amount of traffic technology that's not even into the mix of the conversation. There's something called algorithmic traffic flows. We're coming up on a hard break. We'll talk about this right after the break.
Yeah, we definitely want to talk more about that. Stay with us as we're talking with Vic Mitchell, Republican candidate for governor, here on Finding Colorado's Next Governor. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for staying with us here on Connect and Collaborate as we are finding Colorado's next governor. Today we're talking with Vic Mitchell, a Republican candidate for governor, and we left off the last segment talking about traffic, and you wanted to mention algorithmic traffic models. They challenged me.
That's a big, heavy word for your listeners, but it's really just traffic science. We're so bogged down in the debate about, all the traffic we have here in Colorado, but there's actually applications that are being done around the world where people actually create incentive. The government creates incentives. So you go to coloradotraffic.gov, for example, and it says, I'm traveling today from here to Keystone. It will tell you the optimum time to travel. And you know what? If you travel during that time, you get free use of the express lane or a discounted rate.
Oh.
And if you click the next button over, it'll say, if you're interested in carpooling, there's 2 other people that would be interested in carpooling with you. These types of technologies are available today, but we're so bogged down in the hyper-partisan world of more money, but we're lacking kind of any kind of ingenuity or any innovative thinking. And these types of applications are available. The other thing, too, it's really worth mentioning to your listeners, is the next governor is going to oversee automated vehicles. They're coming. I mean, they're now testing, I think, 5,000 vehicles in Phoenix, Arizona. We are just a couple of years away from having automated vehicles. It's going to be extraordinarily disruptive to our society the way we otherwise know. There's great many Coloradans today that work as delivery drivers, long-haul truckers. It's going to change everything. So we're going to have somebody that can think about this thing with, we're going to need a lot of worker retraining, which the next governor is going to have to deal with. We're going to have to deal with a lot of different things. It's not just going to be budgetary. It's going to be thinking about things 10, 20, 30 years from now, and also bringing into so we keep our heritage and our culture, but we also can come into the 21st century.
Now, one of the areas that still needs workers is the energy industry. Let's talk about where you think the state has gone over the past 8 years with its energy regulations and what you would change, if anything, about energy regulations as governor.
Well, we are now, people don't even know this, but Colorado is the 17th largest producer of energy in the entire world. We're the 7th largest producer in the country. We're also the most regulated state for energy of any state in the country. So we're competing against states like Texas and Wyoming that don't have anywhere near the burdens that we're putting on our producers. So I think we need to look at this. Does that mean that we should do it in an environmentally insensitive way? Of course not. I mean, everybody wants clean air and clean water, and we can do both. But right now the pendulum has swung so far that we're putting so many of our oil producers and natural gas producers out of business. These are jobs that change people's lives, and our clean coal producers as well. So we have to think about this differently. I mean, some of the towns I've visited all over the state, I mean, they've seen 2/3 of their high-paying jobs go away in clean coal. There's been a war on coal. So, I mean, I think we have to do things very differently. I would like to see us start really putting in some meaningful reforms, starting first and foremost with allowing we have one refinery here in Colorado. I'd like them to be able to reform their refinery so they can actually refine the type of oil that we actually drill here in Colorado. People don't know this, that we have a refinery, but it only can do heavy crude, but yet we drill here in Colorado for light sweet crude. So we're literally taking our own oil in our backyard and we're shipping it out of state, sometimes shipping it out of country because we're so back in the 1970s and 1980s from a regulatory scheme.
Let's talk a little bit about PARA. And it's certainly dominating the news lately. Greg Smith and the PARA board have certainly put forth some proposals to fix the unfunded liabilities and challenges around PARA. The governor's put forth his own proposals. I'm part of Secure Futures Colorado. We're looking at some of the reforms that are necessary. What does a Vic Mitchell plan as governor look like for PARA, and how do we fix that?
So let's take a look at, to your listeners, so they know, an individual that receives PARA today in Colorado does not receive Social Security. So most people don't understand that. So this is their retirement funds we're talking about. We also have about a $41 billion fund today, and we're paying out about $2.5 billion a year in beneficiary benefits. So in other words, if they received a 0 rate of return for the next 16 years, they'd be able to pay out all their benefits before the fund became totally insolvent. There is no question that if the current system stands the way it is today, there's tens of billions, possibly over $30 billion of unfunded liabilities. But that's the bad news. The good news is this can be entirely reformed statutorily with some will to do the right thing. My plan is as follows. It's a three-part plan. My plan is as follows. We're going to change the 3-year average. So right now, for people that are coming up on retirement, they get their last 3 years of wages, the highest years of earnings, and they get that 75% of that for the rest of their life. I want to change that to an average of their last 10 years of service. That alone would true up the fund by about 1/3 of it. But I also want to allow temporary workers to work in the state without receiving para benefits. People like unaccredited teachers, people like young people. My plan is to bring in some of our college grads and get a millennial perspective in state government. They would work for a temporary assignment, maybe a couple of years. They would do a lot of community outreach, volunteerism. They'd learn some management skills. They would also get $30,000 of student debt relief, but they would not be able to participate in para. My plan is also, though, and that's the second part of my plan. And the third part of my plan is to allow young people who are, not just young people, any person entering into the system who has more than 10 years to go before retirement, they would be converted to a 401k-like plan. So my plan, to summarize, the people who've been in the system more than 10 years will not be affected. The people who are currently receiving benefits will not be affected. But the new workers who are entering the system will go to a 401k-like plan, just like the private sector does. If we do those 3 things, we can reform para permanently. We'll no longer have an unfunded liability, and everybody who's receiving benefits will receive them the way they were promised.
And while that could lead to a lot more discussion, I want to go back to something you said earlier, just because I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it. You're talking about a pretty radical transformation of healthcare here into the clinic model. Explain a little bit more what you want to do and how we could actually sync this up with current federal government rules, especially knowing the federal government not a big fan of waiving Medicaid rules for states.
Yes. Well, it's going to take some, every single thing I'm talking about, just make sure we're clear, is not going to be easy, Ed. I mean, but nothing in my life's ever been easy. I mean, to think 40 years ago I was sleeping on a floor, and what's the greatest country in the world? 40 years later, you can rise up and run for the highest office in the most consequential election in our state, the state I love so much. So what can we do from a healthcare standpoint? My plan is, and this really came about, my wife and I had been supporting a rural healthcare clinic for a long time, and last year, of all places, we were at the Army-Navy game, and Army won, first time in 15 years, go Army, and we were with our son, and my wife said to me, we were in Maryland, and she said, the clinic we've supported is right next door in Virginia. Why don't we just drive next door and we'll go check it out? Well, I said, it sounded like a great idea. So we ended up driving. It happened to be 400 miles away. And we drove through the night. But what we saw was nothing less than a miracle, and I'll share it with some of your listeners. This tiny little rural health clinic in Wise, Virginia, is run entirely with female nurse practitioners. They have no administrative overhead. They use volunteers from their community. And they do some of the highest quality primary care you can get anywhere, as good as any of us can get from a traditional doctor. They spend about 40 minutes with each patient. They do mammograms, colonoscopies. They do mental health screenings. They do blood work, wellness. They do not only the diagnostics, but the actual treatment. They charge $10 for a visit. They've negotiated with pharmaceutical companies. They give you a $4 prescription drug voucher. This past year, they serviced 25,000 people on a $1.5 million budget. Now put that in some perspective. Our Medicaid clinics are exactly 8 times more expensive than the healthcare clinic that we saw in Wise, Virginia. So we have to start thinking about things very differently than we are today.
How do you do that exactly, though? I mean, are we talking about the elimination or paring down of Medicaid here? And how do you get that passed?
Well, it's a matter of block grants. I mean, my plan is that 50% of these we would open it up to any nurse practitioner, physician assistant clinic, mental health clinic, and they would have to present a budget, a fee-based budget. Some of it will be monthly subscription, some will be fee-based. It'll have to have full transparency in pricing, so you're not worried about what you're going to be charged. Everything's in the full light of day. And then the state would provide up to 50% of their annual operating budget. So they would still have to come to the table with real skin in the game. They would have to pay for their 50% of their model. And then every year we would then, the state would reassess how well they performed. Did they service the 10,000 patients they promised? What was the quality of care? They're going to have peer-to-peer reviews. The whole thing, so it'll be fully transparent. But this would be a much more effective way of doing this, and it's already being done in other states very effectively, as I described in Wise, Virginia.
Vic, thanks so much for spending some time with us. We appreciate you sharing really some concrete ideas and putting forth some proposals on some of these significant policy issues.
And Vic Mitchell, I'm going to give it to you now. How does everybody get a hold of you, find out more information about Vic Mitchell running for governor?
Well, you can go to my website at vicforgov.com, or you can do Facebook.com/vicforgov. That's the number 4 gov. I can tell you I'm the only outsider in this race. I'm the only non-politician. I'm the only one that's taking on the status quo. And if we're going to fix our problems in Colorado, we're going to have to elect an outsider, somebody that has a long career of accomplishment. I've built 6 different companies over the last 30 years. I've created thousands of jobs right here in Colorado. I'm not taking any money from any special interest groups. I'm doing it strictly for the love of our state, and it's because I'm worried about where we're going as a people. So I hope hopefully some of your listeners will check me out. We list all of our speaking events right on our website. You can come. Almost all of our events are free. We've done over 300 events. They're free meet and greets. We do them all over the state. I'd love to meet you in person.
Thanks so much. Vic Mitchell, Republican candidate for governor, here on Finding Colorado's Next Governor on Connect and Collaborate. Thanks for listening.
You're good to...
That's correct.